Hello everyone, and welcome to my Young and the Restless Official 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The moment the truth lands in the sterile air of the hospital like a physical blow, everything tilts, monitors beep in a frantic, irregular rhythm, fluorescent lights hum overhead, and the smell of antiseptic does nothing to mask the metallic tang of fear that floods Sharon's throat as she stares down at Noah's motionless chest and lets out a sound that rips through the corridor. Raw, animal, utterly human. He's not breathing. That scream, less a word than a torn-open vein of panic, snaps the room into motion. Nurses swarm, a doctor's voice barks orders like a whip, a crash cart squeals as if on cue, but none of it outruns the revelation that just came before. Noah's attacker is no random predator or stray madman but someone who has marked the Newmans with a cold, patient malice, someone who has studied their comings and goings, waited for a crack in their armor, and then struck with surgical precision. The name lands like an accusation and a dare. It's an enemy who has been targeting the family, a calculated, personal strike meant to unravel the Newmans in the most intimate place possible, to turn the sanctuary of family into a crime scene. For Nick, the world narrows to the sterile cocoon of the ER bed and the tiny, fragile figure lying there, his son's face pale beneath the bright lamps, his chest barely drawing air as tubes and wires multiply like lifelines Nick can't quite reach. Time fractures, seconds stretch into a cruel infinity where doctors move in their professional, practiced dance and Sharon folds into herself, one hand pressed to her mouth, eyes wide and holy with horror, while a small, involuntary sound of mourning escapes her. A sound that Nick knows he will never forget. He leans over Noah as the medical team works, the clinical language washing over him like a foreign tide. Intubate, compressions, pulse? And he listens for the sound that means everything, that single mechanical whoosh of life returned, but instead hears the beeps, erratic and accusing, each one a countdown he cannot stop. In his mind replay flashbacks like clips from a life he's meant to protect. Noah's laugh as a child, sticky with ice cream. The way the boy's knuckles curl around Nick's finger when storms raged, the first time Noah said, "Dad," and made the word a fortress. Every memory becomes a shard of glass he clutches instead of a shield. Rage begins as a pressure under Nick's ribs, hot and corrosive, but it grows, fed by fear and helplessness, until it becomes something he can no longer contain. He stands, he who has stood tall and controlled through boardroom battles and family betrayals, and the restraint that has always been his hallmark unravels. His voice, when it comes, is a low, viscous thing that makes the hair on his arms stand up. "I'll find whoever did this, and make them pay." The promise is not whispered, it is declared, hammered into the room with the force of a man whose very soul is distilled into one obsession: vengeance, rescue, justice, however the lines blur between them. Around him, the doctors keep working, but they see the change in Nick. The way his jaw locks, the thin white line of a vein on his temple throbbing in time with the defiant rhythm in his chest, and they know, as every one of them has seen before, that he will not be content with merely watching. Sharon, meanwhile, teeters between collapse and fury. She clutches at the bedrail, nails digging into metal, and her face is a map of disbelief. Her eyes, wet and glittering, slide to Nick and then to Noah, and in that glance there is a language without words. "Help me, don't leave me. Fix this." She babbles a fractured prayer, then curses under her breath, then becomes a lighthouse of frantic hope. The hospital corridor outside becomes a theater of murmured speculation. Who could have wanted this? A rival, a scorned ex, an associate with a grudge. The gossip wheels creak into motion even as the medical team fights for breath. But Nick's mind, crystal clear in its fixity of purpose, rejects the easy suspects and instead reconstructs the attack like an investigator. Method, timing, motive. It wasn't random, he thinks, it was chosen. That choice binds the attacker to the Newmans, makes the act personal, intimate, a violation of the private places where families live. He can taste the offense as if it were bile. As they work, a detective arrives, drawn by protocol and the gravity of the crime. He moves with the solemnity of someone carrying bad news, and he carries in his hands not yet a solution but the first brittle threads of a trail. Surveillance footage, a witness statement that claims a shadowy figure was seen lingering near the Newmans' property, a hair found at the scene. The details are staccato and insufficient, but each one is a seed for Nick's ire to grow around. Nick's anger is not simple, it is an iron alloy tempered by guilt. He remembers the last time he told Noah to be careful, the last time he waved him out the door with a lighter admonition. All those little admonitions now hang in the air like unfinished prayers. He thinks of his own enemies, of boardroom adversaries who have spat venom at the Newman name, who have used influence and underhanded tactics to try to topple what Nick has built. His mind, half dulled by panic, sifts through the roster of haters like a man scanning weapons for one that fits. And then the personal burns through. Whoever hurt Noah meant to wound Nick, not just physically but in that invulnerable core where fatherhood and reputation meet. To strike a Newman child is to declare war on the family itself, and Nick answers war with war. Beneath his bow there is a cold arithmetic forming: find the assailant, expose them, ensure they can never again breathe free. He imagines the confrontation. Not the messy, legalistic dance of courts, but a reckoning so precise it is surgical. In his mind's eye he strips away the attacker's bravado, reduces them to a trembling supplicant before the enormity of what they have done. He will not be a passive participant in Noah's fate, he will shove his hands into the gears of the city, wrench truth from those who prefer shadows, and he will wrest payment in a currency older than law, consequence. As paramedics wheel the crash cart back and withdraw, Sharon is escorted to a small, windowless waiting room where fluorescent light does its best to sterilize fear into manageable waiting. She collapses into a chair, trembling like a struck reed, and the detective follows for questions he must fish out with gentle precision. Nick, however, will not bide. He stands in the doorway and watches as the curtain of emergency clinicians becomes a veil of privacy. Once it draws, only a few are left who must witness whether the boy will come back to them. He feels time like a physical thing, viscous, almost tactile, and he cannot abide being outside of it. He paces, but pacing is a poor substitute for action. His contacts begin to stir, a call to a hospital administrator to get more information, a text to an old ally at the Genoa City Police Department requesting urgency, a barely audible instruction to someone at Newman Enterprises to start trawling security footage. Nick's fingers tremble when he types, but the tremor is not of fear so much as the contained energy of a man whose world is being stripped away and who refuses to watch it go without answering. Word leaks, the press is a ravenous thing, and by the time a nurse steps out to tell them that Noah is stable enough to be moved to ICU, there are already whispers in the halls. Cameras will come, questions will come, and in the midst of it all, Nick must hold the line between private pain and public posturing. He feels the historian inside him cataloging events. This will be a chapter, he thinks, a hard one, in the Newman story, and he will make sure the chroniclers record what was done and, more importantly, who did it. When the doctor finally emerges, shoes squeaking on linoleum, the room seems to inhale. The physician's face is a mix of professionalism and human sorrow. He tells them Noah is alive but critical, that his lungs were compromised, that the next 48 hours are crucial. Sharon dissolves into soundless sobs, and Nick's rage cools into a hard, vigilant stare, the kind that promises sleepless nights filled with plans rather than dreams. The detective presses for details, possible motives, enemies, anyone who would wish harm, and Nick gives him names, but not all names. Some things must be dealt with in the dark, he thinks, where the enemy cannot anticipate the blow. He recollects a recent altercation at a charity fundraiser, the overheard threats in a boardroom, the ways rivalries had become personal. Each memory is a possible thread. He refuses to be blind to patterns. As the hours stretch and monitors whisper their constant litany of beeps, Nick sits by Noah's bedside like a sentinel. He holds his son's hand, small, warm, trembling, and for a moment the hallmarks of the tycoon fall away. Here is a father, stripped bare, pleading with the universe for a miracle no money can buy. He whispers to Noah the things men rarely say out loud, apologies for long absences, promises of a future he will fiercely guard, reminders of love that are as much for his own heart as for the boy's. Sharon comes to sit, and together they form a small, fragile island amid the clinical sea. Between them, a vow is made without ceremony: if Noah survives, nothing will be as it was. Protection will become an obsession, rules will harden, the Newman name will be wrapped in an armor made of vigilance and suspicion. And if Noah does not survive, then the promise takes on the weight of a death vow. For grief, for Nick, is a fuel that will burn with the single-mindedness of vengeance. In the background, men and women in suits move, lawyers, aides, spin doctors, already primed, already rehearsing statements for a world that demands narratives even before facts. But Nick is beyond statements, he wants truth. He wants the person who saw fit to treat a child as a pawn to feel the full measure of accountability. He will use law where it will serve him, but he will not be naive about the limits of institutions when faced with a cunning adversary. He knows how to pull levers, to shine light into dark places, to turn allies into hunters. He has made enemies before who were brought low by a single well-placed pressure point. This time, the stakes are more intimate, and so will be the resolution. As night falls and the city around the hospital hums with a million unrelated lives, Nick sits awake, mind a machine of grim calculations. There will be surveillance requests, subpoenas, late-night stakeouts, and the uncomfortable prospect of interrogation that will peel away pretenses. He will call in favors from men who owe him, and he will demand loyalty from those who remain. He will not stop at the first suspect, he will follow the trail until it converges on a face that cannot hide behind alibis. And when that face is found, Nick imagines the confrontation not as spectacle but as the precise administration of consequence, a moment of truth where the attacker understands the magnitude of what was taken and the immensity of what they will lose. In the quiet, he vows to Sharon, to himself, and to the sleeping boy who may yet wake, they will not be victims who simply endure, they will be a force that answers in full measure. The hospital lights flicker as a nurse adjusts a monitor, and for a rare, trembling instant the rhythm on Noah's screen steadies, a small, blessed victory that draws a shuddering breath from Sharon and a crack of a smile from Nick that does not reach his eyes, because relief is partial and the hunt has only begun. But even as hope returns, the knowledge of an enemy's hand in the attack claws at him and sets his course. He will not relent. The words he spoke in the heat of the ER, "I'll find whoever did this, and make them pay," are now the anchor of a life reoriented around one unyielding objective: to protect his son, to punish the hand that struck, and to ensure that the Newman name remains unbowed. Whether the justice he seeks is served in court, in the boardroom, or in a moment far darker and more intimate, Nick knows only one thing with absolute clarity: the person who tried to take his son's breath away has lit a fire that will not be extinguished until they are found, exposed, and made to reckon with the full consequence of their cruelty. The hours that follow take on the quality of a legal deposition and a war room rolled into one. Names are called, histories are dredged, timelines drawn on whiteboards in fevered handwriting, and every small, mundane detail becomes a potential key: a parking ticket, a charity guest list, the exact time a housekeeper clocked out. Nick's instincts, honed by decades of negotiations and betrayals, morph into something thinner and keener. He begins to think in margins and percentages, to parse motives the way a financier parses risk. But beneath that corporate lens burns an animal intelligence, singularly focused: who wanted Noah hurt, and why now? He revisits the last fortnight with forensic cruelty, cataloging who had proximity to Noah, who had caused to exact pain on a father who had made enemies both inside and outside of the city's gilded corridors. He interrogates the ledger of grudges, old partnerships gone sour, boardroom betrayals that left reputations in tatters, public spats where reputations were stripped bare, and he imagines how each might translate into this intimate violence. The detective's presence becomes a constant, an authority to be managed, and Nick plays the part of the cooperative citizen while his mind runs parallel calculations: where his legal team will need to go next, how public statements must be curated to protect the family, which security personnel to reassign, which cameras to prioritize, who among their staff might be compromised. He knows how quickly facts can be weaponized and how easily sympathy can curdle into scandal. Already, in a city that lives on appearances, the narrative of a Newman child attacked will have levers tugged in 10 different directions. Privacy will be the first casualty, the family's grief will be a headline. He will not allow it to be used against them. At home, at the Newman estate, the usual choreography of opulence is replaced by tension and checkpoints. Gates that once opened at a nod require retina scans, guests are rerouted through screened entryways, the staff undergoes questioning and loyalty checks. Security teams work in shifts, eyes bright with caffeine and purpose, armored cars sit stealthily in the garage. For Sharon, whose life has always been an uneasy balance between social grace and private terror, the house becomes both refuge and prison. She paces rooms with a new geometry, always with a route to an exit, always with Noah's favorite blanket within reach, always with her phone charged and within reach. Her public face is practiced for statements and for the television cameras that will surely come, but most of the time she is a woman of silences, small prayers muttered into pillows, lists written in shaky hands, and the shock of almost losing a child changes her with surgical precision. Her friendship circles narrow. Invitations are declined. The gala appearances and charity luncheons that once refreshed her social soul now feel like minefields. She is a fortress softened at the center by the small, fragile patient in the hospital's pediatric ICU, and every visitor is measured against a single question: will you protect my child? Noah, for his part, lies in a world of tubes and half-dreams. His small body is a map of scars and stitches, and his eyes, when they open, are briefly confused, like an animal finding the sky after being underground. He asks for simple things, for cereal, for a toy truck, for a stupid episode of a cartoon he loves, and these requests feel, to Nick, like miracles. Each dad that slips from those half-formed lips is an arrow of joy and terror that pins Nick to a single, unignorable truth: the fight now is not only for vengeance but for the stubbornly ordinary things that mean everything. The Newmans' world, which had so often revolved around power and influence, is reborn around bedtime stories and whispered apologies. Nick makes a promise in the sterile hush of that ward, a promise not to let dread seep back into their lives. It is a promise that will require methods both public and covert. As the police investigation widens, so does the list of possible perpetrators. Friends and enemies are interviewed, past relationships come under renewed scrutiny. The detective, careful and precise, suggests motives that range from petty jealousy to a carefully orchestrated attempt to destabilize the Newman family financially and emotionally. There are those who would benefit from public sympathy turning into scrutiny, activists who want to see Newman Enterprises' dealings exposed, competitors who see the newsroom frenzy as an opportunity to discredit the company, and political actors who might leverage the scandal for leverage. Nick thinks in terms of patterns rather than personalities. A break-in followed by a targeted attack is not the work of a lone amateur, it bears the fingerprints of planning, of someone with access to information about the Newman household schedules and vulnerabilities. He considers the possibility that the attacker was someone with a grudge against him personally, someone who saw the family not as people but as targets. Nick's inner circle begins to shift, old alliances are tested under the new pressure. Some allies arrive with fierce loyalty, offering favors and connections like armor. Others back away subtly, calculating the costs of association at a time when the lights of scrutiny burn hot. There are whispered suggestions that perhaps this was an inside job, a betrayal by someone who resented how the Newman name moved through rooms like a sun that burned everything that crossed its path. The thought makes Nick sick. Inside betrayals are the hardest to strike at because they come wrapped in the comfort of assumed trust. He rehearses confrontations in his head, plans questions that will reveal more than answers, and sets traps for those whose stories do not line up. Meanwhile, the press cycle becomes a beast with an insatiable appetite. Reporters attempt to camp outside the hospital entrance, gossip columns draw lines between the attack and unrelated corporate decisions, pundits offer theories that range from the plausible to the absurd. Nick controls what he can, a brief, measured statement crafted by his PR team that expresses gratitude for the medical staff and asks for privacy. But he knows better than anyone that the public narrative will not be satisfied with mere gratitude. The rumor mill will fabricate villains to fit convenient story arcs, and those fabricated villains will need to be anticipated and invalidated. He engages legal counsel to issue quiet cease and desist letters to outlets speculating irresponsibly. He authorizes limited releases of footage that will confirm only what must be confirmed. Noah is alive, the family is grateful, and the investigation is ongoing. Even as he tampers down the media, he covertly plants seeds in the right ears, confidants in law enforcement, former adversaries who now owe him favors, to begin a parallel, more aggressive line of inquiry.